All right, on this True Law Stories, we're going to talk about a CHP superhero law officer who pulled a man out of a burning car and later on was actually sideswiped on his motorcycle. His life was completely changed. And we're talking about that story and how Rory here helped him to get what he needed after the accident when it was denied. Rory, say hi.
Hello, all. How we doing?
And we're going to talk about his deep investigative efforts. It's really interesting. The importance of not knowing as part of the investigation. One of the biggest surprising factors in personal injury cases in general, and the mysterious note that cracked that case. And we're also going to talk about a Border Patrol agent that was rear ended and had to actually not be able to carry enough water, and why he did not do anything about it for years and should have done it earlier. All this on this True Law Stories. And of course, one of the best ways to grow your business, your law practice, is through video case stories. Go to videocasestory.com where we'll help you collect, craft, and deliver those stories. All right, let's get started. I think there's just so many problems, mental problems behind it. But first, just tell me a little bit about your background.
So I was born and raised in Helena, Montana, and I've just got my grandfather's 99 is still alive, and so he's starting to give out a bunch of the documents. And it was his wife, my grandmother's great grandfather, who immigrated from Norway to Montana in like 1886 or something, right? I can't imagine how. I mean, you got to be a tough cookie to make it. I think that trek, and then to make it to Montana in that time frame. But my grandfather on my mother's side was a power line contractor. So my dad was a lineman, and then when my grandfather died, my dad and my mom and my uncle took over the line contracting company. So I grew up, the son of a lineman, and they're for those who have spent any time with linemen, they know that they're kind of a rough bunch. Um, but great upbringing. In the late 90s, early 2000s, went to the University of Montana, finished there. I joined, I kind of wanted to see the world. So I joined the Peace Corps, was sent to Guatemala, where I met my wife, who was another volunteer. And so we served from '02 to '05. And then we came back to the States. My brother had just had a kid, so we were up in Seattle, and then we spent 9 months in Seattle, and I wanted to see the sun again. So I had never been to San Diego, but we had just gotten married. We had all of our stuff in boxes. And so we just like, screw it, let's just go. Got a U-Haul, came down here, landed in like May or June of '06, and things just kind of took off. She got a job, I got into law school, and it's just been, more or less bliss since then.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That's a great story. And yeah, you don't hear about many attorneys that started out in the Peace Corps. How
Yeah.
did that inform your practice and how
You,
you do law?
what I would say, and I've told people this all the time, and it drives my wife nuts, right? Because for years I just would talk about the Peace Corps so much. But you remember that book? It was like everything I need to know in life I learned in kindergarten.
Yeah.
Be nice. Well, everything that I learned in life that I need to be a good person, to be a great attorney, I learned in the Peace Corps, right? So, for example, I did not speak Spanish. So, the first 3 months is this intense training. You have some technical training, but a lot of it is the language training. And I remember people got on me once because I didn't know what sort of, I can't remember what country. Somebody said some country, and they're like, you don't know what Japan is? And I was like, well, I don't speak Spanish, so I know what Japan is. I don't know what the word is in Spanish, though. So, I mean, I went in with nothing. Um, so you get sent out to your site. They give you the first 3 months are just like on you. You're just this little fish in a fishbowl, and they're watching everything you do. And then you get sent out, and there is no oversight. There is nothing. You have to do everything on your own, and you realize that you're operating between the lack of language and really not understanding or knowing the particular culture of where you're at. I'm gathering about 5% of what is getting thrown at me, whether it be cultural, whether it be language, what's going on in group communities. I know I can understand and retain 5%, and you still make it, right? You still achieve what you need to do. And so, especially in the legal field, oftentimes we're sitting here like we don't know what's going on. We don't know what the future holds, but we know kind of ways that we can find this information out. And regardless of whether you know 95% or whether you know 5%, you have to make decisions, and you have to push forward. kind of the other big thing that I realized is those that did the best in the Peace Corps went in with zero expectations, right? And really, I think now you learn about it as kind of this, the growth mindset versus the non-growth mindset is really what it comes down to. But many people had this expectation of what their experience was going to be like, and the people who they knew, and what it was going to be like. And you get there, and no matter what your background, you do not know what is going to come at you, especially in those sort of things. And so people had this idea about what it was going to be, and it was just a train wreck that followed them because that just doesn't exist. So essentially, you just have to be flexible, know what's going on, and then you want to get somewhere, work hard. I mean, I had a dictionary on me. I had this notebook on me that whenever I heard a new word, if it was a verb, I wrote it in the front of the book. If it was a noun, I wrote it in the back of the book. I would go through that every day. At the end of the day, I had, Spanish homework. I'd go out and talk to people. I went out of just like truly hard work just to get up there, just to get kind of up to speed. And I do see a similarity in this practice. I've been at it for 15 years, and there's some days that it feels like I'm arriving today and I have no clue what it is that I have to do, but I've got to go figure it out by the end of the day.
Hmm.
And I know I can. So
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, I mean, you've got so many different things coming at you. And it's interesting too, because we've talked about these stories and how much of a detective you have to be too, right?
oh man, yeah.
And which I think most people don't. You have to be a negotiator, a detective,
Yeah.
a medical expert, uh, and obviously be an attorney on top of it. Uh,
Yeah.
so I want to get into now a couple of your cases. There's a huge case that you had with a California Highway Patrol officer. Can you tell us a little bit
Yeah. A
about?
motorcycle,
Yeah,
a motorcycle CHP guy. First off, so for those that don't know much about the CHP, it is like an elite force to begin with. And then within the CHP, one of the most elite forces are the motorcycle guys and gals, right?
yeah,
Just because they go through they typically you get a 4-year education, then you apply to the academy. It's a 6 months process. You go out, and I can't remember if they send you out if it's a year, 6 months, whatever it is. But then you go back and you kind of elect to be a motorcycle officer. And it's they only choose a few, and then out of the few that they choose, I can't remember what the numbers are, but most of them don't make it through it.
hmm,
And so you had our guy Joe. Besides, he's from it's from the Southern California. He went to school in Massachusetts, came back, goes to the academy, and then he goes back out. And so this is a guy apparently had never been on a motorcycle, as a kid, going up against probably some officers who grew up wanting to be a chip, right? They wanted to be the motorcycle guy,
yeah,
and and he passes with flying colors, and everything he does throughout his career, it's just like it's just naturally he's just was nailing it. And so even I can't remember if it was 2013 or 2015, he was awarded the Medal of Honor, California Medal of Honor, which is the highest civilian medal that you can get, right?
hmm,
And it's given by the governor. And what it was is there was this car that had flipped over and it started on fire, but somehow the seatbelt was stuck, so the guy couldn't get out. He's sitting there as his car's burning. Joe jumps in, whips his knife out, cuts the belt off, pulls the guy.
jeez,
As they're walking away, like the car blows up due to it burn to death. But Joe did it, and so we get that, and they have a wall at the CHP with all the people who have gotten this. And there, I mean, when you're looking at the wall, there's a number of people, but comparatively to how long the CHP has been in existence and to how many officers have gone through, it's a very select few folks. So and just a nice guy, stud of a human, stud of a guy, stud of an officer. He's going to work one day, so he's, driving on his motorcycle, and there's this kind of like this blind corner. And again, you're looking at it. I'm not sure if you will find any human on the planet who is as trained in motorcycle riding and motorcycle safety as these motorcycle officers. So it's just this whole other level. Driving down, there's this blind corner, a car comes out and just dead on hits him. And I think I was telling you, but how I think it was Randy Johnson in the 90s. There's this thing where he winds up, he pitches and hits a bird as it's like flying through. I mean, for that to happen, you could do it a million times and it wouldn't be the same. And that's what I view this as, is just the way that it happened. I mean, it was just spot on. So super messed up. They didn't think he was going to live to begin with. He has like 9 surgeries in the first 13 or 14 days. During that time, they didn't think, once he gets over the initial shock and trauma, they didn't think that he would live because he was losing too much blood, but somehow makes it through. And that's kind of like the how it kind of started. And so then, we just looked at, I went out there, uh, and when you're looking at this, is the way that I approach it is, especially kind of larger sort of injuries like that, you have to go out and kind of look around. And what do you see? Walk up, walk down, walk left, walk right, look at it all, watch the flow of traffic. What do you see? What do you not see? And we started to see kind of some issues in this corner. And so we ended up filing a lawsuit, and it took about 3 years of a kind of a hard, long fight. But ultimately, it resolved, and things have been good.
And tell me a little bit about what was his life like after the accident?
So, oh, very good point. He ended up, he had a new family.
Hmm.
I think he and his wife at that time had been married a couple of years, but they had 2 kids, and I think like 2 and 3 years old, or 3 and 4, something like that. Very young kids. His wife was from Northern California, so had decided they were going to move back to Northern California. So she takes an early retirement. They decide, hey, we're going to do this. They put their house up for sale. They're going. This is all pre-incident. Then Joe comes home, and he has this beautiful motor brigade that takes him home. I mean, really, really powerful, good stuff. It's a 2-story house, but he can't go upstairs, so he's sleeping in kind of like what is the office. But that office is in the front, and he looks outside. The poor guy, he looks outside, and he's like, "Hey, why is there a for sale sign in our front yard?" So it turns out there was a time period where he could not remember the previous 4 months of his life.
Oh my gosh.
And so slowly that kind of came back, except he still has no memory of the 15 minutes before. He remembers kissing his wife goodbye, and then he's in a hospital. So afterwards, what it looked like is isolation, pain, absolute worry about the future, right?
Yeah.
What are you going to do? The law enforcement, they get paid well, as they should, for what they have to do. He was kind of at the prime of his career, had been at it long enough to where he was very experienced, but still had a long runway ahead of him before any sort of retirement. And, this is kind of like the moment in your life when you're ready to really launch yourself into your kid's future, into your future, all of that stuff. And so you're just stuck sitting there. And the dude who was very athletic, rode a motorcycle all day, was very fit. Now is worried, am I going to be able to walk again?
Hmm.
And am I going to be able to walk without crutches or without sort of assistance? And so, I mean, you can hear from him a little bit more about what that was like, and then pain every day, all day. There was something like 6 screws that were put into his pelvis, ruptured kidneys. I think it was like 23 bones and all that were broken.
Wow.
And so you just have on top of, so, some of the problem with all of these things is everything just compounds itself, right? So
Hmm.
the body heals, the brain and the body can heal when you're getting proper sleep. Right? What your mother said when you were growing up is right. Go to bed early, right? That
Yeah.
you get this proper sleep and it can help you. But if you have so much pain that you can't sleep at night, then your body isn't healing itself, which is giving you pain, which means you can't sleep at night. So your body isn't healing itself. So it's just this sort of vicious sort of cycle. And then here's the problem with litigation is it is every day, all day of uncertainty. And what I always tell people, because some people ask, "Hey, what's my case worth? What's this going to be?" And I tell them, you know what, I don't know, because nor anybody can really tell you, because we have to really look at what's going on. But the more money you get, it's because you were hurt more.
Hmm.
And if it's me, I will take less money in health any day of the week
Yep.
because of all of those ancillary things that come along with it. So now all of a sudden, and I see this not just with law enforcement, but anybody. Most of us, we spend the majority of our waking hours at work. And, for the most of us, especially if you're kind of a happy or you're content, you like your coworkers, you can kind of fill your sort of social cup with that. You feel purpose, you feel kind of excited. You just, that does a lot. Not just that it's a lack of isolation, but it fills that social cup. And so, and your purpose. And when that's taken away from you, you're isolated. You don't have people to talk to. It really kind of really hurts. One thing that it often makes me think about is, you go back to the founding of this country, right? And you go back to what Thomas Jefferson said in the Declaration of Independence. And he said, we're unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And for me, especially as I get older and I do this longer, you start to see life and liberty. Okay, I get that, right? My life, my liberty. Historically, you look at the context there, that makes sense. But what is this pursuit of happiness? It's kind of this wild, sort of radical, funky statement within all of these reasons why we should be done with the English and why we should found this new country. But the pursuit of happiness, and what does it mean? And it really comes down to what it is, especially the catastrophic injuries, what people are suffering from, right? And I mean, you can look at this, there's theological views on it, but essentially, can you do the stuff that makes you happy? Oftentimes that's going to include, yes, playtime with the family,
Hmm.
extracurricular time with the family. And I just went to Disney with my kids. Now, granted, I could never go to Disney and be fine, but to see my kids smile at Disney, I mean, that's like, it's as much as I hate to say it, it's priceless, right?
Yep.
There is a price on it, but it's priceless. Uh, and then, a big thing with the pursuit of happiness is when we as humans do things that we're good at, it makes us happy.
Yep.
And so for all of these folks, especially, like, imagine if you're awesome at something, and especially if you just don't, not necessarily you're not trying, because regardless of who it is, even Michael Jordan said, you had to work on your fundamentals,
Yep.
right? Even if you have a natural ability towards something and you're good at it, it makes you feel so good because you're putting yourself out there. You're making your world or the world a better place. And you have all of these just wonderful things for the pursuit of happiness. And so when you're injured and you're no longer able to do those sort of things, it's not just like, oh, my knee hurts, my back hurts, I can't get out of bed, I have troubles with this. It impacts everything. Now this poor guy who had everything going for him has to sleep in his house office, away from his kids, away from his wife, in some sort of medical bed where he has to look outside and see that his house is for sale, that he didn't know, and he can't go out there. And especially with little kids. I mean, I've got little kids,
Yeah.
and they're crying, they're wanting. I mean, as a human, as a father, you want to provide,
Hmm.
and if you take that away from somebody that they can no longer provide, it's some of it is personality, but a lot of it is that reptilian old part of the brain. I procreate and I make sure that everybody's good, and that's part of who we are. And if you can't do that, even as much as, hey, pour milk, get up, walk to the refrigerator, open it up, grab the milk, pour it in a cup, give it to the kid. They cry and ask for a straw. You walk over, you grab the straw, you put it in the straw. As silly as that sort of interaction is, for me, I know it's everything.
Yep.
And when that is taken away, it's your sense of who you are and what you're supposed to do is taken away. And on top of all of the other stuff, it's terrible. And I think particularly now, everybody gone through the pandemic. And even though now, we try to forget it, put it out of our minds, if you can see somebody has gone through that, you are going to relate, right? Whether you are, actively recognizing that or not, you're going to relate. And I think most of us now know what that feels like. And it is a terrible, terrible feeling. So
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's yeah, that I can only imagine, especially someone that worked that hard all their life,
exactly.
and pride themselves on their fit, do everything themselves and physical. I know I've seen it before so many times, and it's hard to ask for help when you're the one always saving everyone's life.
Absolutely.
So, the accident seems like a cut and dry case. He should get a ton of money. He's a police officer. Why why wasn't it an easy case?
So first off, like anything, is you have to look at where, first off, trying to look at, there's two things with these types of cases. Is one, what's a weird concept for most, because it's just weird, is as the attorney, in looking at how are you harmed,
Hmm.
we have to look at everything. And we have to look at everything today. And we have to look at everything. If you're 38 years old, you're going to live to be, the average male lives to be about 78.8 years old. So we're looking, you know, 30, 40 years into the future. And we have to say, okay, how can what happened at this point in time impact you, kind of take away from you through that whole time frame? And that's hard to get your kind of head wrapped around.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, especially when you're hurt bad, it takes a while to kind of realize, well, we don't know. Are you going to get better? Are you not going to get better? What's going to help with that? Right. And what I always tell people too is that hey, let's say you left something on your floor and you fall and you trip and you hit your knee and it hurts a lot. And so maybe you make an appointment with the doctor, but it takes 3 weeks to get in. And then when you're going to go in, oh, it hurts a little bit, but I'm doing okay. So I'm not going to go to the doctor today. I got to go take my kids somewhere else. And so you just kind of get this treatment as needed. And it could be 5 years later you do something about it, because there's no sort of imminent need. But in California, you get one shot,
Yeah.
right? You don't get to say, hey guys, give me that money right now. Give me a little bit of money right now. If I need something else, I come back. Or you come back a year later. Hey, actually, that little thing I thought was little is actually kind of big. Can you help me out here? They're going to say no, because we have a signed release with a 1542 waiver, which says we're done. So you got nothing else. So one, you're looking at the damages. And so you have to kind of look at from the perspective of, hey, this is going to take a while, but we need to know every way in which you were injured, both from loss of income, loss of use, medically, all of those sort of things. And in the same sense, then you're looking at what are your kind of your pain and suffering, sort of what are the harms and losses that come along with that. Then secondarily, you have to look at who all could have potentially been responsible for this, right? And that's what I'm saying is that, sometimes, hey, if you have a rear end car crash, usually it's just the person who rear ended you, right? That's it. But there's certain situations that kind of make you scratch your head. And it's like, this is the most trained motorcycle officer in the world, right? Potentially, maybe not him himself, but you say this top elite kind of person. How does this happen? So then, and that's when you got to get, pull up the sleeves, do however you want to say it, get out there. You got to go see it for yourself. So I went out there and I saw a few things that looked kind of funny. So then it comes down to like pure investigation. And now there's certain things you can kind of farm out to private investigators. Hey, I need these photos. I need this. I need that. Can you take these measurements? Can you do that? Or you have experts. But there's certain things that the attorney, him or herself, just has to go look for, right? And the beauty of where we're at in the world right now is there is so much stuff online, right? It might take a while to get there, but there is so much stuff online. So, for instance, this had to do on a road, so I started, making inquiries into the local municipality. You can do here, they're called Public Records Act requests, federal, the FOIA requests, but you can start looking online, asking for documents, asking for stuff, and you know what? They've got to give it to you. And they typically do. So, immediately I got, I don't know, I think it was like 1,600 or 2,000 documents. And then from there, then you have to kind of process it and go through it. And so, and for me, I take cases like this, I kind of encapsulate myself in it, and it just kind of overtakes me a little bit to kind of figure out more and figure out more and figure out more. But then also try to track what I'm figuring out, right? So, I have these, charts so that I can make notes for whatever it is. So if I wake up in the middle of the night, I've got all this stuff saved to where it's on an app. I can look at it. I can go through these things, make myself notes, update those notes. And it is amazing what you can find when you start to really dig into that. And you might find 25 things, 25 sort of avenues where you think, hey, there could be something here. And 24 maybe dead ends, but if you get one, all you need is one, right? That can open up into something else. And so we're able to find a few things that way. And now, Google, it's crazy. So Google, I went to Google, and you can go, or the Google Maps. If you go back, look at what this kind of area looked like over a time frame over like the past, I think it was past 15 years. You could kind of see what it did, and that a few things popped up there. And then there was one kind of funny story. I ended up, it ultimately was nothing came of it, but we were able to talk to one person who lived in the area, and she kind of pulled over. Well, no, she was in this turn pocket to take a left. She could no longer take a left because there was this accident. It was there. But as she was driving away, she just happened to take a couple pictures, right? And at first I'm looking at those, and I was like, okay, this is interesting. You see the bike, you see the defendant, and then in the background, like behind everything, there's this work truck. And it's pulled over, but it's kind of pulled over in a spot that it shouldn't be pulled over at. Like, that's not where nobody's parking right
Mm-hmm.
there. Because I'd been out there. I'd seen that kind of where it was at. And I was able to zoom in on the photo, and I could see half of the emblem. And it was like one, I could barely make out one of the words. So I just started Googling, that I can't remember what the first word was. Probably, it was probably quality or something, right? And so I'm Googling that, the area, and then boom, it pops up, that emblem online. And I found out that, okay, so here are two workers who ultimately they just happened to be driving by, and they had stopped, and then they had helped do some translating. It really had nothing to do with the case at that point, but it could have, right?
Mm-hmm.
And all because this woman was just taking these pictures, and because I took time to kind of stop and look and really think about it, and kind of, in that sense, you want to be aware of everything. And then some of it, like, I think one of the biggest things that has helped me is to push your ego aside, right? And to be able to look at something and look at it again and look at it again and say, I don't know what I'm going to find, but I'm going to look to see if there's anything there.
Yes, I love that.
And that has been that is really where you're able to get somewhere. And so sometimes I can go a little bit overboard, kind of belts and suspenders, but I'd rather spend too much time looking than not enough.
Mm-hmm.
And and in this one, luckily, it's, here's the thing about personal injury cases is it starts and stops with the quality of the client, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the better the client is, the more likable, the more believable, all of those sort of things. And whether this is right or wrong, because there's plenty of worthy people who are worthy of compensation that may not get the amount that they do because of past issues that they have. But just, in cold, hard terms, the better the client, the better the case. And this was just one of the best all around clients you could ever imagine.
So, what was the aha moment that shifted everything, and you realized, hey, I'm going to be able to find the money to get him taken care of?
So one thing that I could, one of the things that I do is I start looking at tax rolls, right? The county, you can go into the county, look at what, I go to, you can see who owns something. You can't see how much they owe. Well, actually, you might be able to see what they owe, but you can get a lot of information. But what you do is I go to like Zillow or Redfin or one of those where you can get the parcel number, right? So then I grab the parcel number of a particular lot. Then I can go to the county and put in for the tax bill for the lot, and it'll give me a name. Who owns this particular piece? Who owns this or that? And so that's one way that you can really find out your potential defendants in the area, if it has to do with, if there's kind of a landowner in the area. Um, but it was kind of funny. So apparently, and I have no idea when in the process, it was after I'd gotten a bunch of documents from the city, and I had my like little chart, and then so I must have gone through a certain number of documents. Maybe it was late at night, maybe it was in the middle of the day. My eyes were crossed. I couldn't remember, but I go through it, and then probably like a year and a half later, I happened to be looking back at this chart, and I put a note that just said, that's funny. And that's what I write to, I mean, I don't know if I was writing it to myself. I have no memory of writing it. I have no idea kind of what I was thinking, but I just remember it must have been, I looked at something and I said, well, I don't know what this means, especially in the context of this case, but something's funny here. And it was an issue that tied like one of the main defendants to this. And it was, I mean, I could have overlooked it. Many attorneys could have overlooked it, but the reason we were able to, and maybe ultimately would have found that, I'm not sure, at least to the extent, because it was like, I had, when I first got it, I didn't know I was looking at gold, but I had found gold right there. And so then, because I had tracked it, and it didn't make sense at the time, just because we were so early on in the case and kind of figuring everything out. But at least I knew instinctively, I got to say something here. There's something here, right?
Yeah.
So this is funny, whatever it was that I wrote. But so then, the year and a half later, or however long it was, it started to make sense. And then from that, I got a couple names of folks. I started going down another sort of rabbit hole of looking up what this meant, and then it gives you ideas for what to ask for from the defendants. I got all this stuff, and it just from that point, I mean, I wouldn't say it still is a lot of work, and it takes kind of determination, but that was kind of the point. They're like, okay, we have a connection, and now what we need to do is just roll with it. So,
so at what point did you know? I mean, obviously, because you're preparing for trial, right? At what point did you know, hey, we've got this, and we're gonna get the amount he really deserves?
So it's an interesting question, and I can tell you only at the moment that we actually had something, but I can also tell you from the moment that I met him, right? And so there was this underlying feeling that I had, and somehow, especially in this industry and this job, I've just had some luck and some good senses when it comes to it. But when I heard about this, and when I met Joe and his wife and his family, and I just looked at it, I just knew that there was something big here, right? And it's weird, and it's just this deep down, I knew. Now, granted, you always have that kind of cloud over you, like, hey, is this going to work? Is it not? What's going on? That sort of thing that I could put out of my mind. But it was this weird thing. And it was a really tough case, right? I mean, there were certain aspects of it that were very, very difficult that, I'd shopped around as kind of some bigger trial attorneys. I said I got a lot of no's because they just didn't see something, or they were afraid of something. But I just knew that there was something here.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what we just pushed on. And then we hit a point, there's they want to schedule a mediation. And I was like, hey, there was like 7 or 8 insurance carriers. And I was like, everybody's got to be there. And as soon as I knew everyone was going to be there, I was like, okay, I don't know what the end result's going to be, but everybody should be happy. And then of course everyone was happy at the as it resolved. But
that's amazing. And what do you think was the straw that broke the camel's back that it resolved?
Honestly, everything,
Gotcha.
everything comes back to Joe. That's it, and his family. I mean, that is what it is. And you could
But you
tell
have to tell that
he
story though,
just,
Joe, right? You have to,
yeah, yeah.
I mean,
You
you're,
absolutely have to tell the story.
because it's not just going, hey, here's Joe, and
Yeah.
he's a California Highway Patrol.
He's awesome. No, and so a lot of that is, I mean, really, as I was saying before, I mean, everything comes back to what is he like, and for me, the somebody who works, somebody who's always working hard, and despite adversity, pushes through and is positive about it. You have somebody that comes up every day, says, despite what's happening in the back, today's going to be a good day. And if they're just always positive about it, and if they're willing to just incrementally work hard towards it, because that's the other thing, is there's no bounding here.
Hmm.
These are baby steps. The whole litigation process, the healing process, getting through all of this is about taking 1,000 or 10,000 or 100,000 baby steps to get there. And so with that, you have to have faith as the plaintiff, as the plaintiff's attorney. And I don't necessarily mean faith as in a religious sense, maybe a spiritual sense, but you just have to have faith that the end result will be what you want it to be, and just take those baby steps there. And really, it's when you have a stellar client and you can tell that client story, the rest of it typically will just fall into place.
But man, it seems like you did a lot of detective work there, buddy. So
It was a lot. There was a significant amount of work to get there, right? And
yeah.
so it's kind of funny, it's just this pyramid. And so we had this presentation, and it's for a presentation, it was pretty long. I think it was like an hour and a half. But you just think about I mean, it was thousands of hours, but all for that one little thing. And so basically, all of that work is so that you can tell Joe's story, and not just about Joe, but kind of how did Joe get there? How did this happen? And then what can we do to fix it?
Yep.
And when you can tell that, that's when good things happen.
Yeah. How did it feel when it was all over and you were able to tell Joe?
Like, oh man, I was crying. I mean, it was a very, very powerful moment, right? It was a very powerful moment because it's hey, it is kind of weird to say, hey, as a personal injury attorney, what I do is I give people money, right? But really, what it is that if you can, the money is there to just help them get back on track, right? So that same cycle we talked about. So, what is it that keeps you up at night? Well, am I going to be able to provide for my family? Am I going to be able to provide for my kids? Are we going to be able to buy groceries tomorrow or pay for the car to get fixed, new tires, whatever it is? If you can wipe away those worries because their bank account, they don't have to worry about their bank account, then they can sleep a little bit better. And you sleep a little bit better one day and you feel a lot better that next day. And it's just, again, this slow, incremental kind of steps back to normalcy, back to your life. And that is when it was over, I knew that Joe was going to have that. And that was cool. That was really cool.
Nice. That's amazing. So let's get
Yeah.
on to your other story too about the Border Patrol agent.
So yeah, the Border Patrol agent. This was one of those. It was he was with his family, not working, and he was just rear-ended, right? And it was a big hit. They had a brand new Volvo, like X90. I mean, and the Volvos. I mean, this is like one of the safest cars out there. And it just was in a spot, and the defendant who ran into him was the nicest individual, just a nice human, right? So from the personal injury plaintiff's perspective, we want somebody who's hateable,
Yeah.
right? For our defendant, we want somebody who's hateable
Yeah.
because it's
You need to have
tough.
a bad guy.
But I needed a bad guy, and this was not a bad guy. So that took a while. But so with respect to Dennis, here's what I've seen, especially with law enforcement. All these guys, they have so much gear to wear, and especially the belt. It weighs so much, and you don't really think about it. But when you're doing that for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, especially as you start getting older, it puts a significant amount of pressure on the low back. And then, typically they're going to have a yearly physical or some sort of, periodic physical that they're going to have to pass. And it's not like a physical for normal people with their doctor, right? This is like the CHP had like 14 points. The Border Patrol, I don't know I can't remember what it was, but they have all of these kind of points that they have to meet. But after this, Dennis he had to take off every third day. He had to take off because it was so much stress on his low back. So it was pretty much every Wednesday he was off. And I mean, this is a guy who spent, years working within the federal government, had banked a ton of time because he didn't go on vacation because he's working. And, there's a huge economic benefit for that when you do hit the time of retirement, when you have, a few thousand hours saved in time. I mean, it's big.
Yeah.
It's big. And then when you have an insurance carrier saying, "Oh, well, you got paid time off for that, so you didn't have any loss," and it's like, "F you, man." There's a huge loss right there, right?
Yeah.
Then the other thing is, particularly all these guys are used to a schedule, and they know that if they can do the schedule, if they can do the work, they're going to have a good income. They're going to provide for their family. And now all of a sudden he's sitting there thinking, shoot, if I'm having to take every third day off now, what happens when I'm 5 years older? Or what happens there? Am I going to have to am I only working 3 days a week? Eventually I'm going to run out of PTO or whatever it is they call it, the federal government. And I'm going to run out to where, am I going to lose my job? And, these are some serious concerns. So even though you're working, you're carrying this emotional weight because you don't know what's going to happen. And then, I mean, for those who have even spent time in the San Diego area, it is wild to see the mountains to the east of us.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they are rugged and they are steep, and all these guys do is walk around the mountains.
Yeah.
Right, walking around this rugged mountains, and there was this point in his deposition that he says, he's well, I had him lay out all of his gear and kind of video it on the bed, video it. He weighed himself, then it shows him putting all of it on. It took a long time, and it was, I can't remember what it was, but it was like, I don't know, 20, 30 pounds of stuff that he has on him. And including, you're supposed to have 2 or 3 clips for extra ammunition. You're supposed to have the water on your back, all of these things. He said he started to have to skimp on some of it because it just was too heavy. So now he's not bringing as much water. But he's telling this story about, he's like, well, sometimes I can walk around a bush, and it's weird. I've walked through these mountains, and you can be, 10 feet from somebody and have no idea. And you come around kind of this sort of like large bush, and you could be kind of startled by a person or a group of people sitting there that you had no idea. And it's just Dennis. They're out on his own, and he's talking about it, and you can say, he says, well, I can turn a corner and there could be danger, there could be people. And he says, all it is me. And he kind of he hand gestured for the radio, right, so that he can call in for help. But he even mentioned, he says, if I'm turning a corner and there's 6 guys, he says, I'm looking around. Where's my gun? Is there a rock I can throw if I have to? And he says, and then I've just got this. And so, but even if he calls it in, nobody's going to be there immediately. So you have this very, very, potentially scary job. And then on the other hand, he says, essentially, are these people trying to kill me, or do they need medical assistance?
Yeah.
So it's just this weird thing. And he was telling us, I'm like, what?
That. Yeah.
You're turning the corner. So all of these sort of things that are going on, but still then he's having to carry less stuff because it's too much stress on his body. He's worried about, what is this going to mean for future work? Am I going to be able to is he going to be able to make it to the retirement age? All of those sort of things. And it's not what you want when you're that far along in your law enforcement career. It's just terrible.
Did he call you right away? Did he call an attorney right away?
No, and so that one was actually because it was one of those things, and I've heard this before where people say, "Well, I'm not the type that sues,"
Yeah.
right? I mean, this is the insurance industry has spent billions of dollars trying to convince people you don't want to be the type that sues. You shouldn't be the type that sues. But one of the things that I tell people is, imagine I say, "Hey, Ian, imagine I give you, or I say, hey, can I have $20? I just need $20 for today. Give it back to you later." And you say, yeah, Rory, here you go. Here's $20. And then the next day, 2 days later, you come back and you say, hey, Rory, can I have the $20? And I say, no, I'm not giving it back to you. Ian, are you wrong because you think that the $20 you gave to me should go back to you?
No.
No, you're not.
No.
And so with these injury cases, you just get this mindset and it's kind of twofold. One is that, oh, I'm not the type that sues, right? But you have to get over that. I'm not the type that sues. Nobody who sues is the type that sue. It's more about something was taken from you, right? Your health was taken from you. And because your health was taken, now there's like wages are taken from you. Quality of life is taken from you. Happiness is taken from you. And although, the lawyer can't get that back, I can't get you happiness from yesterday. I can't make you unhurt yesterday.
Yeah.
But what we can do is we can get you compensated for that. And that's kind of what it goes. The second sort of point is denial,
Hmm.
right? And I've seen this a lot, especially those who are really hurt. And I mean, I would hope I wouldn't be, but I think ultimately I would be the same way. Hey, life for many of us, it's still a grind. It's not like puppy dogs and rainbows all the time. You have to work at it. And then now all of a sudden, if you have this injury, now you're limited. You're going to have to deal with it. You're going to have to deal with pain. You're going to have to go to the doctor. You're going to have to admit that you're not 100%. And many people have troubles with that. And it's not because it's denial as some sort of deficiency. It's more kind of being overly hopeful. In my hopefulness of being okay, I'm in denial that I'm not okay. And I've seen this often. And even people say, oh, I know I'm hurt. It's like, yeah, I know you're hurt, but I don't think you understand just how hurt you are or just how much this is going to impact you. But I'll be here, right? I'll be here for about 6 months when it kind of starts to come around. So that's kind of the other thing. And so they got to me I talked to them about a year and a half after the incident. And then right before the 2 years is when they came back and they kind of realized, hey, I think we need to do something.
Wow.
And so we pushed forward.
And tell me about the case. It's like the outcome. How'd you get there?
So, some of what it is that it's just the biggest thing for a case like that is showing.
Hmm.
Some of it has to do with one of the reasons why showing you got a great client, why it's going to go well is because most jury pools will believe the person.
Yep.
And that's what it comes down to. And so some of the stuff, one of the things that I've done, which I thought has been very successful, is it's easy for an insurance defense attorney to say, hey, that plaintiff, yeah, they may seem nice, but they get more money if they say they're more hurt. So I'm not saying they're a liar, right? I'm not saying they're a liar, but they get more money if they're hurt, right? So it's a way you just overtly call somebody a liar, a plaintiff a liar. Oh, that didn't happen that way. Oh, they weren't hurt that much. Oh, it's something else. Or you can kind of more subtly call somebody a liar. But so what I do is I like to go talk to friends and family. And what I tell people is that I want to talk to people who are close to you in proximity or in heart, right? Maybe it's the checkout person at the local grocery store who you see every day. They're close to you in proximity. You may not even know their name, even though you look at their name tag every day you see them. Or maybe your brother, your sister, your mother lives 3,000 miles away, but you talk to them every day or talk to them throughout the week. And so they can tell if something's going on. So I want to talk to those folks. And I just kind of talk to them about how were they before, and have you noticed anything different? And that kind of opens the conversation, starts the conversation, and you get wonderful things. For example, I had this wonderful family that was originally from Mexico. They were in San Diego. The mother was just a wonderful human, but she was stoic, right? She would not say much, but she was just there. She was working hard, doing what she can, but she was loving. You could tell she was loving. They had like I think a 20-year-old and then like teen daughters. And so fine, and I'm like, I know the woman got hurt. She was walking in a parking lot and a car hit her as her arm was out, right? I know she's hurt. I've seen her. I've been to her house. I know she's kind of the shoulder's hurt, but I can't get anything from her. She's like, I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. So we asked the oldest daughter, and it took a long time, and it took a long time. And finally, the daughter says, well, you know, uh, at, at, at dinner, when we're sitting around and I'll ask my mom to pass me something, she goes to pass it and her kind of arm gives out. And there were two huge things that I got from there. Number one, this is a family that every single night they're eating dinner together.
Mhm.
That's huge,
Yep.
right? That says so much about the family. And then two, um, a mother's job is to feed her kids, right? And so if a mom can't feed her kids, it's like the worst thing ever. It is the worst thing ever. So I just could imagine what is going on when every time she went, she can't lift the food. I mean, it's just the symbolism was crazy,
Yeah.
but just the real fact of like you physically can't feed your kids as you were before. And so what does that make you feel? How are you not able to accomplish like your basic tasks that you think you're supposed to accomplish? So that's one of the things we did in all of these cases, but particularly in Dennis, is you could talk to kind of those around you, and then just we're able to show that hey, the guy was hurt. It's a real injury. We didn't have to get to this point because the case resolved. But one thing I was thinking about doing was getting him suited up in his gear, getting a GoPro either on me or on him, and a little elevation tracker, and then going out and walk around with him for just even 2 hours in those mountains
Yeah.
and have kind of a split screen and do it fast, fast, speed it up so you could see what the terrain was like. And then on the other side, see how kind of high and low and the elevation was going.
Yeah.
I wish we could have done that, but hey, things resolved before then.
Yeah. No, that's great. You got him a result. And how did that change his life?
So I think some of the biggest things is, he ultimately retired kind of early just because the back was in so much pain. And he wants to live a longer life. And so then it comes down to, a comfort level. A lot of us, especially if you have kind of like a government track job where where you're going, right?
Yeah.
Many of us in the private sector, you may not know, hey, you could get fired or terminated, whatever. But in the government wise, like, hey, I can work to 57, I can work to whatever age, and then I'm going to switch over to, going to get a pension, then I'm going to get something else. And so there's some real comfort in knowing that you're going to be taken care of and be able to take care of your family, right? And so you can sleep well right now because, in 10 years, you're covered. Whereas when this happens, all of a sudden, it's just like, oh no, what I've been thinking about for 25 years might not actually happen. And so even though it's a job and it's work, it still all comes down to money.
Yep.
We're all working for money. And so to be able to supplement it all so that he's comfortable, and again that he can there was a void,
Hmm.
and that is filled. I've actually drawn this out for people before, and what I like to see is, I remember ninth grade algebra, right? You have your little y-axis and x-axis, and you think about, okay, if you have just this sort of angle that goes up, that this is the natural progression of your life. You have kind of a solid line until the point of injury, and then you can have kind of a dotted line of this is where I would have gone, right? Would have gone right there to the top of the molding, right? But you have this incident, and then you kind of drop down a little bit, maybe kind of go up and maybe get better. And you start to kind of go on that same route. But at that same point in time, you're down here when your real life would be here. So you have this kind of this difference. And what I say is that your harms and losses are the difference between here. And so if you can fill that void, then you're giving the person's life back.
Yeah, that's great. That's amazing. Um, well, Roy, this has been fantastic. So,
Yeah.
if someone's been injured, obviously, one of the biggest things you work with hard working people, um, and what advice do you give to them? Obviously, you can call you, but if someone's been injured and is on the fence, with?
What I would say is this: two things. Number one, as strange as it sounds, get medical attention. If you have a chiropractor you like, go to the chiropractor. If you have PT, if you have a naturopathic doctor, if you have a general practitioner, immediately get medical attention. Go to the urgent care. Do something, right? Just to cover yourself. One is to make sure, are you okay? And then follow up. The second point, I mean, and then, continue with the treatment of what you need. The second point would be, of course, I'm going to say find an attorney and, hey, look at me. But the biggest thing is this: you have to find an attorney that you can groove with, right? Because at the end of the case, I move on to the next one, and you, the client, are stuck with what you're left with. If that's great, that's wonderful for you. If that's not great, that isn't wonderful for you. So every step along the way, particularly the most important step in choosing the attorney, is you have to choose the person who is right for you and your family. One thing I tell people that seems to, visually it works well. You think about this. I could be the world's best dancer. You, the client, could be the world's best dancer. And we could dance with each other and we could step on each other's toes. It doesn't mean I'm a bad dancer or you're a bad dancer. It just means we weren't meant to dance with each other.
Mhm.
And so you need to be able to find the person that you can dance with, whoever it is. That is the most important part. It is a tough process. You spend most of the time in the dark. You don't know kind of what's going on. You have all of these sort of outlying medical or economic issues going on, like money issues going on. And you have to be able to say, hey, I can either ask this, I feel comfortable to ask this attorney, or I know that they care, and I know that they're looking out for my back. And that is all on you, the client. So, you got to choose the person that you feel good with. And then if you meet with somebody and you don't feel good, move on to the next.
Yes, that's amazing, amazing advice. And so, if someone does want to hire you, what are the steps?
Well, so you can call us 619-344-8699. Go to the website. We've got we're getting up the little web form. You can email me, Rory at rorylaw.com, RORY at RORYLAW.com. I purposely did not include my last name so we don't have too many R's. So
It's a simple email address. I love it. I love
yeah.
it. I know. I've overcomplicated email addresses before,
I
and people are like, "I
have
emailed
two.
you." I'm like,
I
"Yeah,
have
you
two.
missed some letters in there."
There's a hyphen. You don't spell it out. It's just the hyphen.
Awesome. Well, Roy, thank you so much for being on True Law
Yes.
Stories.
Yeah. Thank you very much. It was fun. Appreciate it.
And thank you all for joining Rory and I on True Law Stories. This has been Ian Garlic. And make sure to contact Rory if you have been injured in a car accident in California.